Broadcasting live to the world. Now, it's Sheila Zilinsky. Sheila Zilinsky Show, the only show to give you the truth behind the headlines, prophecy, and the deeper things of God. Now, here is your host, end-time watchwoman, Sheila Zilinsky.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Monday, October 19th, 2015 edition of the Sheila Zilinsky Show. I broadcast weekdays, that's Monday to Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and on Saturday night on Worldwide Christian Radio and WINB at 11 p.m. Eastern. The information is there at weekendvigilante.com. Just click on that Radio Archives tab and you can see the call-in number as well. I want to thank everyone for being patient at the end of last week. We had some incredible sound issues going on. In fact, it started with the Tim Alberino show. There was this really bizarre clicking noise going on in the background. We could not get it figured out, and I actually had to get a sound guy in to look at all the equipment. Many people emailed me that there was no show Thursday and Friday, and I do want to apologize. And we did finally get to the root of it. So we are sounding good. The issue is resolved, and we are back on the air. So it's great to be with you today. I just want to remind people about an incredible, amazing event. And when I say amazing, I do mean that in every sense of the word. November 13th, 14th, and 15th, the Appearance Ministries, that's right, Augusto Perez is having an incredible event, Light in the Darkness, a foreshadowing of his glory in Live Oak, Florida. That's next month. Do get to that event. Make it happen. Figure out a way. It is going to be a transformative event, a life-changing event, and I believe that God is going to work in such an incredible way. I really do believe that Augusto Perez is a modern-day Smith Wigglesworth. He's such an incredible man. I've been to one of his events, and I'm telling you, you're going to want to be there. I'm going to be there. I told him I'm going to duct tape myself to a Greyhound bus to get there, but I'm going to be there, so I hope to see you at that event. It's going to be, again, a very life-changing event. We have a lot of new listeners, and I want to encourage the new listeners, if you have not got in your hands a copy of my book, Green Gospel, there couldn't be a more timely book. Do get a copy. The information in it is so imperative. And again, as Dr. Tim Ball, who's actually going to be on the program tomorrow, says, Sheila Zilinsky's book, Green Gospel, effectively demolishes most of what you think you know. So do get a copy of it. You can go to greengospel.ca. There's a very easy order now tab on the left. You click on it, it'll take you directly to Amazon.com, and there also is an ebook available. I like to personally have a physical copy, highlight it, mark it up. I personally like physical copies, but do get yourself a copy nonetheless, and do give copies out to pastors, church friends. This is the greatest deception of our era, and it is so important that people understand it. Again, greengospel.ca, and do fill out a review on Amazon if you've already purchased the book. And I thank you in advance for that. I am very excited to have on two guests today. My guest this first half is the highly acclaimed Texas activist, Dr. Laura Pressley, who's been featured many times on Alex Jones, Fox News, and media around the globe. She's worked for almost 25 years in the science and semiconductor industry as an engineer, a former top-level manager for Motorola. She has authored many peer-reviewed researched publications on advanced micro devices and free-scale semiconductors. She's testified against the TSA. She fought fluoridation in municipal water. and she's the first person to implement a smart meter opt-out program in the state of Texas. She is a smart meter wrecking ball, and she's my kind of woman, and it is my pleasure to have her back to the program. Dr. Laura, welcome back to the show. It is such a pleasure to have you back on the program.
Well, Sheila, thank you so much for having me. I just love your show, and thank heavens you are an absolute angel on this earth, educating everybody on these really hard topics that are difficult for everyone to understand, and you do such a great job at it, so thank you.
Well, to me personally, this whole smart grid, it is a nightmare issue. The smart tech, the smart meters, smartphones, smart appliances, smart cars, smart TVs, smart surveillance, even smart cities are now being built. Smart meters is something I've personally had a passion about. I've spoken out against and fought for years. Tell our listeners, Dr. Pressley, how you, as an engineer and chemist, got involved in smart meters.
Well, that's a great question. It was about 3 years ago. My husband and I were noticing some health issues and things like headaches and what now I would term involuntary muscle contractions that we would have on a periodic basis. And we would notice these as we were going to sleep at night. Our legs would kind of jerk. The muscles would contract and it would jerk a little bit. And this went on for about a year, a little more than a year, and we could not figure out what was going on. We just, were just really surprised at, this involuntary muscle movement that was occurring. My husband and I are both engineers, and so he started counting the seconds between the jerks of our legs, and it was 25 seconds, and that was a really wake-up call for us, that this thing was a periodic stimulation that was going on completely beyond our control. And we were set out on a mission to try to figure this out. And so we looked at several things in our home. We knew this was an electrical stimulation. We looked at compressors. For example, like our air conditioning compressor, was that coming on every 25 seconds? In our refrigerator, in our air conditioning unit, et cetera, what was causing this periodic stimulation? And we couldn't find it. And so we had a friend who had a radiation meter, a high-frequency radiation meter from Gigahertz Solutions, and he brought it over, and we measured our smart meter, and it was pulsing every 25 seconds. So we called our utility company. We were thinking, gosh, something is just not working correctly. This should not be occurring on this periodic basis like this, especially at night when we're trying to go to sleep, when we were noticing these. And they came out, and yes, it was pulsing every 25 seconds. And so that started the ball rolling, where I was working with our utility department here in Austin, Texas. Austin's interesting. We, as a municipality, we own our own electric company. And so we were not dealing with an Encore or a CenterPoint, a very distant private entity supplying our power to our home. It was a utility company owned by the city, and we as taxpayers in the city own this utility. And so they were very responsive. We worked with them for about a year. We ended up with a opt-out program, one of the cheapest in the United States. We have a program where it's a $75 fee to replace it with an old analog meter, and then $10 a month for them to come read it. Now, we were not happy about the fees. We tried really hard to get a no opt-out fee option, but we just couldn't do it. So we settled for the next best thing. So that kind of is how it started. And, since then, I've learned so much. There is an actual diagnosis, medical diagnosis. People can go on WebMD and look up periodic limb movement. It is a illness that is on the web, periodic limb movement. It's a subset of other type of sleep disorders. And interestingly, in the diagnosis of this, when it describes what happens to your body as this is occurring, it is a pulse of someone's leg every 20 to 40 seconds. And this is on WebMD. And so I'm like, this is exactly what my husband and I were dealing with. And, they recommend that on WebMD that you should take sedatives to try to minimize the effects of this so you can sleep at night. Because what this was doing was waking us up at night, these little leg jerks. And there is a diagnosis out there now that's periodic limb movement from every 20 to 40 seconds.
Incredible. Well, really, as I said earlier, Laura, you are a wrecking ball against these smart meters. And, most people have heard about smart meters. Some refer to them as spy meters, but it's not just the surveillance, big brother attacking, tracking, hacking issue. It's the bigger overarching issue of EMR, wireless radiation, and the totality of all these devices and the culmination of what it's doing to the human body. Of course, we've all heard of them, but what are smart meters? Talk about the electrical design of these things and how it employs switching mode power supply that generates very high levels of electromagnetic frequencies, EMF.
One type, which I think is the worst of the two worlds, is it has a wireless radiation signal that pulses every, like it says, 20 to 40 seconds. And so you get this huge pulse of high energy radio frequency. Then you also get a pulse of, typically there are two channels that these things operate under, a high energy radio frequency, RF, and then microwave. And that is a big problem. And so it's communicating with the wireless network in the utility company. They usually have these data concentrators on the power lines that accept this data. And again, those concentrators are communicating with the smart meters. So you're having a two-way communication. Smart meters pulsing, and then these data collectors are pulsing also in neighborhoods. And these data collectors can have a range of over a mile. So that is really scary. So you've got so much radiation, going on at your home and your neighborhoods. And so that's kind of how it operates, communicating your electricity usage. And why does it have to communicate every 20 to 40 seconds? That's beyond me. That's a good question right now. But then the other piece of this is that it causes electrical pulses within the electrical circuitry of our homes. Think of your house, and if you could see through the walls, you could see the electrical lines, the copper lines going through your home, and it just surrounds each room, in your home. And your circuit breaker box has multiple circuits on it that, you can turn on and off, and each circuit deals with a circuit in your home. And so when these things pulse, they send an electrical pulse through the circuitry also. So now not only do you have radiation, you have an electrical pulse of voltage. It's called a voltage transient. And the switching mode power supplies, which these smart meters employ, they're digital, and so they have a computer chip in there. And these switching mode power supplies actually create a lot of voltage noise themselves because they're going back and forth between DC and AC. With the chips in the smart meter can only accept a DC current. And so it has to kind of change the AC current to the DC and then DC back. And so it creates this huge noise along, these lines in your home. So you get hit two ways with radiation and plus the electrical noise.
Yeah. Well, in October of 2013, the American Academy of Environmental Medicines issued a report documenting the negative health effects associated with automated smart meter. And in the report, it called for physicians and health providers to consider the role of EMF and RF in the disease process, diagnosis, and even the treatment of patients. That's huge. Dr. Pressley, are you surprised that doctors are now paying attention to this?
Yes, I am surprised. What you just read is just a absolutely kind of nail in the coffin for smart meters. But again, it got no press, and except on your show, on the big mainstream media. This is something they did not cover, and I was so encouraged when the American Academy of Environmental Medicine put this out, and they called for a moratorium against these smart meters until more studies are done, and they are trying to educate doctors on the health effects because they are severe. Just imagine, we did not, thousands of years ago, we did not have these pulsing devices near our heads or near, our living spaces. Our bodies cannot deal with this. This is not something that we've been able to evolve a resiliency to. We just not had the time. If you think about all this wireless radiation, it's only been going on for about the last 10, 15 years. I mean, just imagine. It is almost like just a blip in time that this kind of stuff just hit us. And our bodies just cannot tolerate it. One of the things that it's really interesting, this WebMD diagnosis of periodic limb movement, they talk about who is susceptible to this. And it's very interesting. One of the things that they say, medical conditions or people who are prone to anemia. And what's very interesting to me is that this is the mechanism that these smart meters have been shown to affect. They damage red blood cells. And so what happens is the people who are sensitive to these things, and I think everybody's sensitive to them, actually, are you aware of it or not? But anemia is a fingerprint blood test. What happens is these red blood cells are damaged by the radiation, and they become where they can't transfer oxygen. So people are fatigued and tired and anemic because they're trying to reproduce these red blood cells over and over again because they're being constantly damaged. So anemia is a big, big sign that you've got some radiation issues going on, especially in men. My husband and I both had anemia, and men just typically don't have, problems with being anemic. Women do. So when we opted out and shut off some of our wireless devices in our home, the anemia went away.
From a biological standpoint, it's been shown on record that red blood cells are damaged and thus cannot transfer oxygen efficiently when exposed to the radiation of electric smart meters. Talk about the incredible documentary, Take Back Your Power, when they in real time put people near a smart meter and what was happening to the blood cells.
Oh, I was just mesmerized when I saw that data, and it's a beautiful representation. It's a visual representation he's using in that documentary. I think it's a dark field microscopy picture of red blood cells and how they stack up on, like you said, stack up on each other. They're not able to transfer oxygen efficiently, and they have this bottle capping effect of the sidewalls where you can see the sidewalls are beginning to expand and burst. And so the red blood cells are becoming damaged, i.e. anemia. And so it all makes sense now. Looking back at the symptoms I had from a personal standpoint, looking at what the research is showing, this stuff is so consistent and it's real. And you can't avoid it if you're a professional and you have to have a phone and you've got, different devices in your home. And so what we tell people is what we have to do is minimize it when you go to sleep at night, because that's when your body repairs. If your body cannot calm down and repair itself at night when you're sleeping, you're constantly under attack. And you can't get a break from, the radiation and the damage that's occurring. So, one of the things people can do, they can choose to turn off their devices, at their home, because we all have choices. We can turn off our Xboxes, we can turn off our routers and our modems. And interestingly, I've measured a lot of different homes here in Austin and helped people who are very sensitive. We had a woman who called us whose daughter was having seizures, and when they opted out of their smart meter, her seizures stopped. So it just tells you it's affecting brain waves. And so you really have to make the choice of kind of, less convenient devices around your house, and just say, especially when you're going to sleep at night, unplug everything. Just unplug it. Let your body calm down. Let it repair. And then you get up in the morning and then you can go out and into the real world where all this stuff is happening, and you can tolerate it and you can have some resiliency to it. But if you don't repair your body at night, that's when cells start mutating and you have damage and your body's exhausted and it can't repair the way it normally would.
What are the most common side effects?
The common health effects are, and you kind of go up in a scale of intensity. Headaches are probably one of the first things that people notice. What happens is you have some inflammation and you have swelling. As the red blood cells are not transferring oxygen and as your cells are being damaged, the inflammation mechanisms kick in and you just start getting inflamed, so you get a headache. You can get migraines. Headaches are probably the first pass. That's one of the things I first notice when I'm in a field that's very, very strong. And so there's also a term this is a very interesting term that's brought up in the documentary, Take Back Your Power, a flash headache. I've never heard that term before, but a young girl, a teenager in the documentary explained how she felt as she passed by a smart meter. She said she got this, and she used her hand. I don't know if you remember this, Sheila. She put her hand up to her head, and she just kind of spread her fingers apart, like a flash headache. And it is, and it comes and it goes, because It's an inflammation, instant inflammation, and it's just overwhelming, and then it stops. It's not like a normal headache that takes, 10 or 15 minutes after you take a Advil or a Tylenol for it to go away. It's a flash headache. So that's a big sign right there, and that's usually the first sign. I mean, you can sometimes notice skin sensations, like, like something's touching your skin a little bit, and that's something that, I've heard people experience. And then I've also heard, as you go further and more problematic symptoms, are digestive issues where tummies are gurgling and people are having digestive problems. Chest pains, I've heard of that. I've heard of ear aches. When people hold their phones up to their ear for way too long, you'll get an earache. I've heard of people they have iPhones that their wrists get numb and their fingertips are numb. I mean, just imagine that people are noticing these things. I have a little flip phone. I don't use an iPad or, a very strong phone just to minimize it because I'm on the phone a lot and I want to minimize it as much as possible. I have a little cheapo flip phone. But I have had friends who said their fingertips get numb and their wrists get sore.
Yeah, I've actually had that sensation myself using iPhones and iPads to the point where it's just complete numbness. When you step back and take a macro view of all this isn't a Mary Shelley or a Gene Roddenberry movie, folks. This is a sci-fi come to life. We're getting bathed in this stuff between the transmitters and the cell towers and the phones everywhere. It reeks of depopulation. The nefarious who's who of the globalists have said on record they want a nice, manageable population, about 500 million, depending on who you talk to. The head of the CIA is on record saying, hey, we're going to spy on you through your smart appliances. When you think of the coalescence of this, the geoengineering, the chemtrails, the GMO, frankenfoods, chemicals like fluoride in the water, you fought that. We're getting pummeled 6 ways to Sunday. And then to think we're getting bathed in all this stuff between the transmitters and the cell towers and the phones, this is a sci-fi.
I know, it's very sad. And, it's interesting, thank God for your shows, Sheila, because this is the only place where people are being told this stuff. This is the only place. Because it's not convenient financially for, a lot of these corporations. So, it's going to take all of us getting out there, talking to each other, talking to our friends. I was at a friend's house yesterday, and I measured his house with this radiation meter. and all I could hear was, oh, my God. And he just kept saying this. And here's another thing. We've always been told, you remember in the 70s when, because I'm 52, I remember in the 70s when microwave ovens first came out, and how they said, don't stand in front of them. This really strong, radiation is not good for the children and all this. And we measured his microwave. Oh, heavens. It was like the hugest, it was off the chart on the meter. We don't realize this. Our microwave ovens are not even shielded appropriately. And this is exactly what's happening. These pulses are hitting us. They're not in the visible spectrum. They're off in the lower energy spectrum of radio frequency and microwaves. We can't see them, but our bodies can feel them.
Dr. Pressley, you're a brilliant doctor, very researched and acclaimed, trained in chemistry and engineering. You're obviously very familiar with peer-reviewed studies and the importance of scientific studies. As you were doing your research, what really shocked you the most, and what were you most surprised to learn?
The thing I was the most surprised was the red blood cell damage. I think that is, if people could just watch one thing, and we have that on I want to mention our website at austonsmartmeters.com. We have a section on testimonials, and if anybody watches just one thing, it is that red blood cell image, the dark field microscopy picture of the red blood cells being damaged, and how they just repair themselves when you get out of it. And that explains these flash headaches, these flash symptoms that occur. And that, to me, was the strongest, most powerful thing, and it's visual, and you just can't argue the damage that's occurring. It's a very powerful picture.
Yeah, well, again, we're just getting inundated. We're getting bathed in a toxic stew of toxicity. And I think the stunning part of this is like telling someone, hey, go jump in your microwave oven. Because really, that's really what we're up against here. We're kind of being bathed in a big, massive microwave oven with all this stuff. And that alone is a frightening nightmare.
It is a nightmare, and people don't realize what the consequences are from a radiation standpoint. Just the radiation background is just being raised up and up and up, orders of magnitude. And the privacy issues are real. Why does my electric company need to know my electric usage every 30 seconds? What on earth are they doing with this information? Why do they need it? They don't need it. That just right there just tells me, why wouldn't they pulse once a day, maybe noon, and leave me alone, especially when I'm sleeping? What it is that they're constantly pinging the system for data. Why? How much memory do they need? It's for everybody under the sun. Oh my gosh. It's so sad. It is just so sad. And and here you'll have families with little infants or children or babies, and their room is right on the wall with where the smart meter is. Now look at apartments. This is what's really sad to me, and I've had friends that have had to deal with this. Apartment complexes, which will have maybe 20 to 30 to 40 smart meters on one bedroom wall, right? Because the complex is all of their electricity comes into one location, and they put them all on one wall because they thought that's how they were going to, manually read these, and they were being efficient with building and all this stuff. What happens now is you have 20 to 40 smart meters on one wall, and you'll have a child or a baby or an infant's bedroom right next to it. And that breaks my heart, Sheila, because parents don't know the damage that's occurring. And, like I said, we had a girl who, she was having seizures at night. They opted out of their smart meter, and the seizures stopped. You know what? If my child's having seizures, and if I can opt out of my smart meter and her seizures stop, I'll do it. If we could see it, we wouldn't be tolerating this. There's no way. We're tolerating this because people are not educated, and they can't see it. Some of us are kind of the canaries in the mine shaft, and we can feel it, and we're more sensitive. And as it becomes higher and higher levels, more people are going to complain because you're now getting into that bell curve distribution of people that are sensitive. And, one thing, Canada and Europe have taken the first steps into banning Wi-Fi in schools, banning Wi-Fi in daycares, because they know of the effects it's having on children. And that's the leading indicator that we need to get to here in the U.S. Start banning this stuff because of children. Because children's brains and their skulls are not as large and robust and as thick as adult brains are, adult skulls. And so little children, infants have very thin skulls. They're going to feel these effects before we do and be damaged before adults are. We have choices. We can turn our stuff off at night. We can choose not to have a high-powered iPhone. We can choose to use a landline on our computer. These are all choices. Now, are they convenient choices? No. All right, but you have to make, each one of us has to make our own decisions of what we're willing to do and how important our health is. To me, my health is incredibly important. We've made choices in our family to, kind of back up a little bit. Not completely. Like I said, if you can heal at night, that's the most important thing. But we have choices. We're very concerned, about smart meters that are imposed on us by our electric company. But we have choices in our own home that are worse than our smart meter in some cases, and we still have them. And so, I don't give us much, leeway because we have those choices, and we have to say no to the having the phone, using it as a alarm clock at night. Get a battery-powered alarm clock. Don't use your cell phone, your iPhone, for an alarm clock. You don't have to have a Xbox. You don't have to have a router. You can have a landline coming into your home. And it's actually quicker. It's actually it operates at a higher speed from an internet search standpoint. So there's all these options, consumer options that we have chosen that we can back up a little bit and say no. That latest gadget, no, I'm not going to do that because of the radiation.
Exactly. Say no to radiation, but also getting involved locally to combat these other nightmare scenarios like fluoridation in the water. You took on that issue. You took on the TSA. I mean, these are genuine issues, and yet they're never being covered by the mainstream media. They get very little play, and people are often written off as kooks when they do bring these up, which is really disheartening.
With regard to fluoridation in the water, I'm a chemist. I have a PhD in chemistry, and my positions on the dangers of fluoride, the chemistry of fluoride was in question. I'm like, how can you question that? I'm a chemist. I'm a subject matter expert in this regard. But there's still a lot of misinformation out there with regard to fluoridation, with regard to radiation issues like smart meters and all of that. So that got attacked from, the standpoint of not being mainstream. And I got to see again how non-mainstream this knowledge is. And what's interesting is the TSA agents, when a woman comes through who's pregnant, or a woman or a family comes through with children, they will divert the children and divert the pregnant woman away from the body scanner. Just watch it. That's their own TSA procedures. And so if a pregnant woman should not go through that, I'm sure there are people who have other type of sensitivities. People, children with autism, people that have pacemakers, people that have heart disease or sensitive hearts, etc. This is a big pulse of radiation. Now, what's interesting, the wavelength of the TSA scanners, I've done a lot of research on this, the wavelength is 10 times higher in energy than your microwave oven. Microwave ovens operate at 2.5 gigahertz because that's the frequency of exciting water and heating water, all right? But the TSA scanners, I have the data from the manufacturer, 25 gigahertz, 10 times higher than your oven. And so they will divert pregnant women, they will divert little children away from those into the normal, metal scanners that is just a lot lower energy, reflects off the metal, and it detects that. So why am I going through it? I'm sensitive, so I'm not going through that scanner. And I'm just going to be real blunt about it. I hate having people put their hands between my legs. I don't like it. And it is just very uncomfortable, but it's less uncomfortable than going through the radiation. And the best thing we have is the truth. And our forefathers knew the power of the truth. The truth has its own inherent power. And look, Sheila, how much effort is spent stifling the truth because it is so powerful. So this is our power, is our truth and our intuition about what's good for us. And I really do believe that focusing locally on the problems in your area is the most powerful thing we can do. We decided to do that here in Austin with regard to the smart meters. Local, control, local issues, local education. Your local stuff is very powerful. And we focus there, and we say no. We absolutely say no, this is not acceptable. And if more people did that, this stuff would stop.
You are so right. It absolutely would stop. This is a very important issue, and I really do encourage people to go to the bio today and get on the Austin Smart Meters website. There's some incredible information there. Dr. Pressley, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a privilege.
Oh, I love you so much, Sheila. Thank you so much for everything you do, and just bless you.
Folks, that was Dr. Laura Pressley. Her information is linked there today on the Monday bio at weekendvigilante.com. Stay tuned. We'll be back after a quick break with Dr. James Manning. Stick around, back after the break.